You open your eyes beneath an ancient sky. It stretches endlessly above you, a quiet ocean of gold and pale blue, rippling over the high plains of the Iranian plateau. The morning air tastes of dust and salt. The horizon hums with the slow rhythm of creation. Somewhere in this silence, before the first city, before the first name for God, the story of Persia was already forming. A seed beneath the sand, waiting for light. The world around you feels untouched, almost sacred. Wind sighs through the Zagros mountains, brushing across stone ridges worn smooth by time. In the distance, faint trails crisscross the desert, paths carved not by armies, but by herds of gazelle, camels, and wandering humans who once followed the rhythm of the seasons. They carried no banners, no emblems of empire, only survival, memory, and the instinct to move toward the rising sun. You walk through their traces. Each footprint, each flint fragment half buried in dust speaks of beginnings. Long before the name Persis would be whispered in royal courts, these early peoples roamed the valleys of Anshan and Elam. Their fires flickered beneath the stars, their songs rose into night winds that carried across mountains and plains. Out of their language, simple and strong, the future tongue of kings would one day emerge. The air is dry yet rich with scent, wild thyme's smoke, and the faint sweetness of date palms growing near hidden springs. You hear the crackle of a distant hearth. Imagine the small circle of tents around it, woven from goat hair and patience. Children sleep curled beside embers, their parents speaking softly of roots, rainfall, and spirits that live among the stones. These were not yet Persians, but they were the breath before Persia, the pulse before empire. As you move, dawn deepens. Shadows slip back toward the mountains. Light spills slowly over the land, revealing the veins of rivers long vanished, the bones of water that once gave life to this plateau. Beneath your feet lie the remains of ancient Elamite cities, Susa, Anshan, and the ghost of a world older than memory. Their clay tablets pressed with wedge-shaped signs spoke of kings who ruled before Cyrus, of temples that smelled of oil and copper. They are silent now, but they whisper still, if you listen between heartbeats. You pause beside a low ridge. From here the landscape opens wide, plains that will one day be called Fars, the cradle of a dynasty. To the north lies the vast salt desert, to the south the Persian Gulf, glinting faintly like a mirror of sky. Somewhere between them, people learned to build, to shape mud into bricks, to draw boundaries around belief. It was here that the first sparks of unity began to flicker, and in that flicker you sense Achaemenes, though his birth was centuries away. The name has not yet been spoken, but his lineage sleeps within the tribes that graze these fields. A leader will rise, humble yet steadfast, and gather clans beneath one standard. His descendants will stretch their reach across half the known world. But for now you hear only the quiet rustle of grass, the hush before destiny begins to speak. The wind changes. It carries the sound of bronze striking stone, the first tools shaping the earth. Villages form near rivers where barley grows tall. Potters trace spirals on clay. Artisans press simple marks that will evolve into royal script. The people build ziggurats to honor unseen gods, stacking their hopes toward heaven. Each generation adds another layer of faith, another word to the long sentence of history. You walk among them, unseen but close, like a traveler within a dream. A woman grinds grain on a flat stone. A boy watches the horizon where traders will appear with lapis from Afghanistan and tin from the west. The smell of bread mingles with the scent of warm dust. In these ordinary moments, the foundation of empire forms, not through conquest but through rhythm. Sow, harvest, build, pray, rest, and begin again. Night falls for a moment in your memory, then rises again, centuries passing like breaths. Elam's kings rise and fade, their walls crumble, their gods turn to myth. Yet through each collapse, something endures, a belief that order can be shaped from chaos, that the land itself carries purpose. The people learn from each empire that passes through, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Medes. They watch, they adapt, and they wait. The stars return, brighter now. Under their glow, you see travelers crossing the plateau, merchants, messengers, dreamers. They bring stories of distant civilizations, Egypt by the Nile, Greece by the sea, India beyond the mountains. The plateau becomes a meeting place, a bridge between worlds. Languages mingle, ideas spark. The Persian spirit, though still unnamed, begins to breathe deeper, curious, tolerant, eager to absorb the wisdom of others. Somewhere at a campfire's edge, an elder lifts his eyes to the Milky Way and murmurs a prayer for harmony among men. His words vanish into the cool air, but they echo forward in time into the proclamations of future kings. The belief that mercy could stand beside might, that was born here beneath this same canopy of stars. You sit upon a stone and close your eyes. The silence around you is not empty, it is full of waiting. You feel the memory of rivers beneath the desert floor, of seeds lying dormant in dry soil. The earth remembers every step that has crossed it, every promise whispered to it. The desert, patient as eternity, prepares for a dawn greater than this one, a dawn that will bear a name. Time drifts. The horizon softens again with morning light. In the faint gold of sunrise, you can almost see them, the first Persians, tending their herds, sharpening tools, watching the same sun you now watch. Their eyes reflect both struggle and hope. They do not know the empire they will father, but they already live by its virtues: endurance, balance, and the quiet belief that greatness begins with humility. A soft wind brushes your cheek. It carries with it the scent of saffron and the distant roar of something vast yet unborn. You listen closely. Beneath the hum of the wind you can almost hear the stir of hooves, the call of banners not yet raised, the murmur of a people coming together. History breathes in its sleep. The sky brightens once more, revealing the full expanse of the plateau. Boundless, solemn, luminous. You stand within it, feeling both ancient and small. Somewhere beyond those mountains, the lineage of Achaemenes waits to be awakened. And when it does, the world will tilt toward a new kind of light. The sun lifts higher, spilling gold across the sands. Shadows stretch, fade, and merge with the horizon. You take a slow breath, letting the warmth sink into your skin. Every empire begins with a sunrise, and this one has just begun. The wind grows still. The silence returns, soft as sleep. And as you drift with it, one gentle thought lingers in your mind. If the earth remembers its first dawn, will it remember the name that is about to be spoken? Persia. It begins softly, as all beginnings do. The wind sighs over the pale ridges of the Zagros Mountains, carrying the scent of cedar and dust. Far below, in the valley where light meets shadow, a handful of tents shimmer like forgotten stars. You can almost hear them breathe, the early Persians, a tribe without monuments, without a name that echoed beyond the stones. They did not yet call themselves Achaemenids. They were shepherds, traders, horsemen. But even in their simplicity, they carried a strange calm, the quiet discipline of a people waiting for purpose. And then came the man who would give them that purpose. His name was Achaemenes, Hakamanish in the old tongue. He was not born in a palace. He did not rule through iron. He ruled through respect. The story says he was a man of great height, with a voice like distant thunder, the kind that did not frighten but commanded silence. He walked the mountain trails beside his people, shared their bread, their worries, their hopes. In his eyes burned something ancient, a conviction that Persia was not meant to remain scattered. You can feel it now, standing beside him in the chill of dawn. The mountains rise like silent guardians around Anshan. Every rock, every tree seems to listen as Achaemenes speaks to his tribe, not of conquest, but of unity, not of blood, but of belonging. "We are many fires," he said once, "but we burn from the same sun." And from those words something invisible stirred, a vision that would outlive him. The old chronicles tell that he first united the clans along the Karun River, teaching them to defend their grazing lands, to settle, to build. He made pacts with Elamite neighbors, trading obsidian and grain for tools and bronze. Slowly, the wandering tribes became a people, the Parsa. Their symbol, the lion rising toward the light, was not chosen for war, but for courage. It stood for balance, strength with mercy, might with restraint. And beneath that symbol, Achaemenes founded what would become the House of Achaemenes, the first dynasty of Persia. You walk through the settlement with him now, simple mud-brick homes, goats bleating, children laughing near the stream. Nothing looks like the beginning of an empire. Yet history often hides its grandest stories in humble places. Night falls over Anshan. Fires flicker like constellations reflected on earth. You sit beside the chieftain as he looks toward the stars, the same stars his descendants will later carve on palaces and banners. There is no crown on his head, no throne beneath him, only the quiet certainty of a man who knows he is part of something greater than himself. He closes his eyes. Perhaps he dreams of the lands beyond, the rich plains of Elam, the far valleys where the Medes dwell, the distant Assyrian frontiers pulsing with danger. He does not yet know that one day his bloodline will face and conquer them all. But deep within his heart, he already feels the pull of destiny. In the cold of morning the tribe gathers. They offer bread, milk, and the soft smoke of incense to the rising sun. This is not yet Zoroastrianism, not yet the flame of Ahura Mazda, but the seed is there, the reverence for light, for purity, for truth. They believed that light was sacred, the bridge between man and divinity. And so each dawn became a promise. Achaemenes would protect his people as the sun protects the world, steady, unseen, unending. You can almost hear the whisper of that ritual, the crackle of fire, the murmured prayers carried by wind through the hills. It feels peaceful, timeless, like standing at the very moment when faith itself is born. Years pass like sand through fingers. So Achaemenes grows older. His beard turns to silver, his gaze softer, but his legacy begins to harden into history. Under his rule, Anshan prospers. The tribes learn trade routes stretching from the Persian Gulf to the mountains of Media. Caravans bring news, tales of distant kings, of bronze chariots and great wars, but none of it tempts him. He knows his people are not ready for empire. Instead, he gives them something far stronger, identity. And with that, he builds the foundation of all that will come, for without identity, even greatness is dust. When Achaemenes dies, there is no grand tomb, no armies march, no trumpets sound. But the valley mourns, quietly, like a mother for her firstborn. His sons, Tispes among them, gather his ashes and return them to the mountains. They say the wind carried his spirit into the stone, where it still whispers when the dawn light touches the peaks. You feel that whisper now, soft, ancient, patient. It carries a message that echoes through time. Build not to conquer, but to endure. And that is what his descendants will do. Tispes will rise after him. From Tispes will come Cyrus the Fierce, and from Cyrus Theues, Cambyses, and then Cyrus the Great, the man who will awaken the world. But here, beneath the mountain sky, the story is still young. The seed sleeps, wrapped in silence. The lion of light rests, waiting for its day to roar. You stand one last time at the foot of Anshan, the air thick with dawn's gold. Somewhere in the valley a shepherd calls to his flock, the same call that will one day echo across continents. And as the wind moves through the grass, you realize empires are not born in battlefields. They begin in hearts, in quiet decisions, in faith that tomorrow can be better than today. The seed of kings has been planted. The dream has taken its first breath. And as the horizon blushes with light, you feel time itself leaning forward, toward the next great name, Cyrus the Great, and the birth of a vision that will change the world. It begins in stillness, a silence vast as the desert. You stand on the edge of dawn where the Karun River glimmers like a thread of molten gold through the valleys of Anshan. The air hums with the scent of date palms and dust. Somewhere in the distance, a shepherd sings, his voice carried like prayer across the plain. Here among the sleeping hills, the dream of Persia stirs once more, and from the blood of Achaemenes, the child who would change the shape of the world opens his eyes. They called him Cyrus, son of Cambyses, grandson of Tespes, heir to a promise older than any crown. He was not born into peace. Beyond the mountains lay kingdoms locked in endless conflict, Elam, Media, Lydia, Babylon, each one hungering for power, each one believing itself eternal. But even as a boy, Cyrus felt something different. He was taught the art of war, yet his heart leaned toward justice. He learned to wield a sword, but his mind lingered on fairness, how to rule men not by the blade, but by the bond. The elders say that when he was still a child, he asked his father, "Can a man command others if he cannot first command his own soul?" And Cambyses smiled, for he saw in his son the makings of something rare. You follow Cyrus as he grows, tall, calm, eyes bright as obsidian. He walks among his people, speaks their tongue, listens to their songs. The Persians loved him not for his birthright, but for his humility. By the time he reaches manhood, Media, the northern power ruled by his grandfather Astyages, holds Persia under its shadow. Cyrus serves under the Median banners, yet he never forgets who he is. When Astyages' cruelty deepens and the Median nobles turn restless, a quiet wind of change begins to move. It begins, as history so often does, in whispers. One night, a messenger rides through the valley. The Medes are rising, and Cyrus, the young prince of Anshan, stands at the center of it. You see the campfires glow along the ridges, not of rebellion born of hatred, but of destiny born of belief. Cyrus does not thirst for blood. He fights because he must, to free Persia from servitude, to create a new kind of rule. And when the dawn comes, the Medes surrender without slaughter. Astyages is captured, but Cyrus spares him. The world tilts. Mercy, not vengeance, becomes the foundation of power. From that day, the Achaemenid Empire begins its slow, graceful rise. You walk beside Cyrus as he marches across lands, Lydia, Elam, and finally Babylon, the jewel of the ancient world. But wherever he goes, cities do not burn. They breathe. When the gates of Babylon open to him in 539 BCE, there is no massacre. The soldiers of Persia enter quietly, torches low, banners folded. The people of Babylon, weary from tyranny, look upon him not as a conqueror, but as a deliverer. In the grand halls of Nebuchadnezzar's palace, Cyrus stands before the statue of Marduk, god of Babylon. He bows his head, not to worship, but to show respect. He declares freedom to the captives, restoring their temples, returning their gods to their shrines. Among them are the Jews, exiled from Jerusalem decades before. And so he writes an order, one that will echo through millennia. Let all who wish return to their homeland. Let them rebuild their temples and live according to their laws. It is called the Cyrus Cylinder, the world's first declaration of human rights. You can almost feel the cylinder's cool clay beneath your fingers, its cuneiform lines whispering promises that still sound modern. No man was to be enslaved by another, no temple desecrated, no faith forbidden. For the first time in recorded history, power bowed before humanity. Outside the palace, the people gather under the starlight. Some cry, some kneel, some simply breathe free air for the first time in years. And in that moment, you understand why history remembers Cyrus not as a conqueror, but as the father. He built roads, minted coins, and established governors across his empire, but never imposed his will upon their souls. He ruled more than 40 nations, and yet each kept its language, its laws, its gods. He did not seek to erase difference, he sought to preserve it. Persia under him became not a cage of power, but a garden of civilizations. You drift through the royal city of Pasargadae, where his palace stands open to the wind. Marble pillars rise toward the sky. Lotus motifs bloom across the walls, symbols of life and renewal. The gardens shimmer with water channels that mirror the stars. Cyrus walks among them quietly, hands clasped behind his back, a ruler who preferred silence to spectacle. Sometimes he pauses beside the streams, watching how water bends around every stone, soft yet unstoppable. That, he once said, was how a ruler should be. Years later, as his empire expands toward the Indus and Aegean, Cyrus grows older, but not colder. He leads one last campaign to the northeast, where the Massagetê tribes roam beyond the Oxus River. There, in the harsh steppe, his story meets its end. But even in death he teaches peace. His tomb still stands today in Pasargadae, a simple stone house upon 6 steps, no jewels, no carvings of conquest. Only an inscription that once read, "O man, I am Cyrus, who founded the Persian Empire. Grudge me not this little earth that covers my body. You stand before that tomb now. The night is cool, the stars bright as tears. The desert hums softly, not with mourning but with gratitude." Because Cyrus had built something rare, an empire that ruled through wisdom, a legacy that endured through virtue, a dream that outlived time. As you turn away, the wind sighs across the plain, the same wind that once carried Achaemenes' whisper through the mountains. It seems to say, empires fall, humanity endures. The horizon glows with the faint blush of dawn. You feel the warmth of tomorrow blooming behind you, and somewhere beyond that light a city begins to rise, carved in stone and sunlight. It will be called Persepolis, the city of light and stone, and that is where your dream drifts next. It begins with light, a slow golden tide spilling over the mountains of Fars, warming the stones that once shimmered like fire. You awaken beneath that same dawn, and before you rises Persepolis, the dream of an empire that believed beauty could outlive kings. The air trembles with stillness. The plateau glows like polished copper, carved terraces layered like the steps of heaven. Here, on this sacred ground, Darius the Great once stood, his gaze sweeping across the plain as he envisioned not a fortress of war, but a sanctuary of peace and ceremony. He called it Parsa, the city of the Persians. The Greeks would later name it Persepolis. To his people it was more than stone, it was an idea, an eternal stage where nations gathered to celebrate order, not conquest. You step through the gate of all nations, where 2 colossal guardians, winged bulls with human faces, tower above the entrance. Their eyes, carved from silent stone, still seem to watch. Behind them, a vast courtyard opens like the inside of a dream. Pillars rise tall as cedar trees, each crowned with twin-headed bulls, symbols of balance, strength and patience. Here the empire met itself. Delegations from Egypt, India, Lydia, Babylon, Bactria, and beyond would arrive each spring, bearing gifts for the Nowruz festival, the Persian New Year. You can almost see them now, moving up the grand staircases carved with reliefs, robes flowing, faces serene, hands carrying gold, incense and tribute. No chains, no humiliation. Only respect, each nation recognized, each culture preserved. This was the soul of the Achaemenid vision. Darius began the work around 518 BCE, choosing the site near Mount Rahmat, the Mountain of Mercy. Thousands of artisans came from every corner of the empire, stonecutters from Egypt, sculptors from Ionia, engineers from Babylon, goldsmiths from Susa. Their languages mingled like music across the terraces. Under the steady Persian sun, they built terraces of limestone that rose 40 feet from the plain. They carved channels for water, so that fountains would sing even in the dry heat. Walls were lined with glazed brick, polished to mirror the sky. And every inscription, whether in Old Persian, Elamite, or Akkadian, began with the same truth. By the grace of Ahura Mazda, this I built. You feel it now, that harmony between devotion and design. Persepolis was not built for conquest, it was built for presence. In the heart of the complex lies the Apadana Palace, its hall vast enough to hold 10,000 souls. 72 pillars once held its roof, tall, slender, almost weightless against the sky. On its staircases, hundreds of figures march in eternal procession. Persians, Medes, Armenians, Scythians, Nubians, each one carved not as a subject, but as a participant in the great circle of empire. Their gestures are calm, their eyes meet. Even stone seems to breathe peace. Walk closer. You can trace their robes, the flowers they carry, the delicacy of their hair carved 3 millennia ago. Nothing here was accidental. Every detail, every fold was meant to remind those who entered. Harmony is the highest art. Now you wander through the throne hall, where Darius and his successors received envoys and nobles. The walls shimmered once with gold-leaf reliefs. The ceilings were lined with cedar beams from Lebanon. Perfumes from India burned in bronze bowls. And in the quiet corners, scribes recorded every word on clay tablets, thousands of which still survive, telling stories not of conquest, but of wages paid, rations given, rights respected. Women worked as artisans, administrators, and overseers, their names carefully inscribed beside men's. In Persepolis, every role was a part of the design, every life a necessary thread. At night, the city became a sea of firelight. Oil lamps glowed along the terraces, their flames flickering against walls painted in cobalt, gold, and ochre. Musicians played the santur and drum, and dancers moved like shadows beneath the stars. From the hall of 100 columns, the view stretched toward endless desert, a horizon soft as silk, a reminder that all this splendor lived at the edge of silence. You feel it now, the paradox that defined Persia, power wrapped in gentleness, ceremony rooted in faith. Then came Xerxes, the son of Darius, and the city grew even more magnificent. He added palaces, halls, gateways, each one bearing the same reverence for beauty and order. It was under Xerxes that Persepolis became the beating heart of empire. Here, kings were crowned. Here, oaths were sworn before the sacred fire of Ahura Mazda. Here, ambassadors from far lands saw not tyranny, but civilization refined to silence. Even as Xerxes led his armies westward toward Greece, he returned often to Persepolis, to bathe his spirit in the calm of its terraces, to remember that even kings must bow before time. Centuries would pass. Fire and storm would one day find this place. Alexander's torches would sweep through its halls, and the marble would crack beneath the heat. But even ruin cannot erase intention. Even ashes remember form. And now, as you walk through what remains, pillars reaching for a sky they will never touch again, walls whispering the names of forgotten artisans, you realize Persepolis did not fall. It merely changed shape. Because beauty once born never dies, it simply turns to memory. The sun sinks low, and the wind sighs softly through the broken capitals. You close your eyes and hear what the stones still sing. We were not built to last forever. We were built to remind forever what harmony looks like. The light fades to amber. The shadows stretch long across the plain, and the city that once touched heaven rests gently beneath the stars. Somewhere beyond this silence, another heartbeat stirs. The steady rhythm of order, law, and power that Darius dreamed of, now ready to pulse across the empire. You follow that sound into the next dream, where roads stretch like veins through continents, and thought itself becomes a kingdom. It begins not with glory, but with silence. A quiet morning after a storm, the kind of silence that feels heavy, as though the world itself is waiting to exhale. You stand on the edge of the Persian plateau, where the sun climbs slowly over pale mountains, and a single figure stands alone watching the horizon. His name is Darius, the son of Hystaspes. Not yet a king, not yet a legend. But within him burns a fire that would one day illuminate half the known world. When Cambyses, the son of Cyrus, fell into madness and death, the empire he inherited fractured into chaos. Pretenders rose from every corner, false kings, rebels, and dreamers, each claiming the throne. 20 provinces, once loyal, were now aflame with ambition. It was a time of whispers and daggers, of cities torn between loyalty and fear. The empire that had once stretched from the Indus to the Aegean now trembled on the edge of ruin. And yet, in the midst of this storm, Darius, then only a royal guard, began to move like destiny itself. He claimed a vision, a divine calling from Ahura Mazda, the god of truth and order. And so he gathered a few loyal men, struck down the false king Gaumata, and stood before the silent court at Pasargadae, declaring not his right by birth, but his right by justice. By the will of Ahura Mazda, he said, I am Darius, who loves righteousness, who hates the lie. You can almost hear that voice now, calm, certain, like the sound of a river finding its way through stone. From that day onward, Darius began to rebuild the empire, not through war alone, but through order. He saw the chaos of provinces and decided to give them structure. He divided his vast realm into satrapies, 20 provinces, each ruled by a satrap or governor. Taxes were fixed, justice was recorded, and a system of accountability began that would inspire governments for centuries. But Darius understood something deeper than power. He knew that trust was the true foundation of empire. So he built it, stone by stone, law by law. You walk now beside him through the royal road, a marvel that stretched more than 2,700 kilometers, from Sardis near the Aegean Sea to the heart of Susa. Couriers on swift horses carried messages across it in mere days, changing mounts at royal stations every 25 miles. Neither snow nor rain nor darkness of night, the couriers would say, shall stop the messenger of the king. It was not just a road, it was a vein through which the lifeblood of civilization flowed. Gold, silk, languages and prayers all moved along its dust, binding worlds together beneath one crown. You imagine the rhythm of hooves echoing through dawn, the scent of desert wind and cedar, and the hum of voices in dozens of tongues, all speaking, trading and dreaming under the peace of Darius. He built Susa and Persepolis, but also touched lands he would never see. In Egypt, he restored temples and respected the gods of the Nile. In Babylon, he kept their festivals alive. In Ionia, he allowed Greek cities to govern themselves under Persian protection. To every people he ruled, he said the same truth. Your God may be different, your tongue may be strange but you are all my people. This was not empire through fear, it was empire through balance. And yet, behind the calm of his reign there was always the echo of resistance. Revolts flickered like distant stars, small but never gone. Darius faced them not with wrath, but with precision. He would travel across the empire himself, listening to disputes, inspecting the satraps, and carving inscriptions in stone, not to boast, but to teach. At Behistun, high upon a cliff of limestone, he ordered his story to be carved for all eternity. There, in 3 languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Akkadian, the king's victories were written not as conquest, but as restoration of truth over the lie. You look up and see the carving now, Darius standing tall, his foot upon the body of the false king, and behind him the rebel leaders bound in silence. Above them all the winged symbol of Ahura Mazda, watching, unblinking, eternal. Years passed. Under his rule the empire flourished like a living garden. Trade flowed from India's spices to Egypt's grain, from Anatolia's silver to Bactria's lapis lazuli. Artisans built cities that glowed with symmetry and light. Philosophers, scribes, and priests found safety in a world where truth was sacred law. Even the smallest child born under Darius's sky could travel from the Indus to the Mediterranean without fear of bandit or border, for all roads were under one justice. The Persians called him Darayava-Hush, the holder of good, the keeper of balance. But no rain is without shadow. In his later years, Darius faced the restless West, the rising defiance of Greece. He sent armies across the Aegean, but the winds and the fates were not kind. At Marathon, his legions faltered. For the first time, the invincible empire met resistance it could not crush. And yet Darius did not rage. He retreated into reflection, understanding that even kings must yield to the will of time. He turned his gaze back east, where the empire's heart still beat strong, and began to build again. Roads, palaces, inscriptions, as if to remind the gods that perfection was a pursuit, not a possession. Now, centuries later, you stand within the ruins of his work, in the silence of Persepolis, in the echo of Behistун's stone, in the dust where the royal road once shimmered beneath sun and moon. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you can almost hear him whisper, "Do not let chaos rule your soul. Build your order, even if it begins with a single stone." The wind moves through the pillars like a slow breath. The world feels vast again, yet strangely at peace. And as you walk toward the fading horizon, the empire dissolves into dusk, but its idea remains glowing faintly like an ember beneath the sands of time. It begins with the sound of hooves, soft at first, then steady, rhythmic like the heartbeat of the earth itself. You open your eyes to a horizon painted in gold and sand. The dawn stretches wide across the plains of Lydia, and in the pale light, a narrow line cuts through the desert. A road so perfect, so precise, it seems drawn by the hands of gods. This is the royal road, the thread that holds the Persian Empire together. It stretches from Sardis near the blue waters of the Aegean Sea to Susa, the jewel of the East, a journey of nearly 2,700 kilometers, crossing mountains, rivers, and silence. And yet, no part of it feels empty. Every mile breathes, with travelers, traders, priests, and king's messengers moving like blood through a single living body. You begin to walk. The wind tastes of cedar and spice. Somewhere ahead, a caravan jingles with bronze bells, and the faint laughter of merchants rises into the morning air. Persia's empire was vast, 20 provinces bound not by chains, but by the promise that this road would keep them connected. At every 25 miles you find relay stations, built by Darius himself. They stand like small oases, where couriers rest their horses, share bread, and carry sealed messages bearing the mark of the king. The messages travel faster than the wind, for even in the dark of night, torches burn at every post. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor darkness of night can halt the messengers of the king. These words would echo through centuries, becoming the heartbeat of communication itself. You meet one such courier, his tunic dusty, his eyes sharp with purpose. He bows slightly as he passes, the seal of Darius gleaming on his arm. In his satchel lies a message written in cuneiform, a royal decree from Persepolis to Sardis. You ask him what it says, and he only smiles. "The words of the king," he whispers, "travel faster than I can breathe." Then he is gone. A cloud of dust, a memory swallowed by the horizon. As you walk further east, the landscape begins to change. Green valleys rise between sharp ridges, villages hum beside rivers, and the scent of bread mixes with incense from distant temples. Every land you pass feels different, yet all bear the same harmony. A Babylonian trader greets a Lydian farmer. An Elamite craftsman shares water with a Median guard. No one speaks the same tongue, but all understand the same symbol, the golden emblem of the Persian lion, and the promise it carries, peace through order. You reach a city where caravans gather like stars around a moon. Here, silk from India, ivory from Africa, and wine from Anatolia all meet in the same market square. Coins of Darius gleam, the daric stamped with the king's image, circulating through hands that have never seen his face, yet trust his name. Above the noise of trade, you hear the gentle rhythm of prayers. Zoroastrian priests tend the sacred fire beside merchants of 100 gods. Each flame dances differently, yet all light the same night. It is here you realize the royal road is more than distance. It is dialogue. It speaks through footsteps, laughter, and faith. It binds together people who may never meet again, yet share the same dust beneath their feet. Night falls softly over the plains. The moon rises, pale and round, casting long shadows of travelers moving eastward. You rest near a fire with an old scribe, his beard silver like frost. He tells you he serves as a recorder of dreams, collecting stories from those who pass. Every road, he says, remembers its travelers, and when we walk upon it, we walk upon memory itself. He writes slowly, his reed pen scratching against clay. The light from the fire flickers across his face, and you wonder how many stories lie buried along this endless path. As dawn breaks again, you approach Susa, the beating heart of the empire. Its walls gleam in the rising sun, and the great palace gates shimmer with blue glazed tiles painted with lions, lotus flowers, and warriors. This was where the messages ended, where the empire's pulse slowed to rest before beginning again. You step into the hall of audience, and for a moment, silence stretches wide. On the polished stone floor, couriers kneel before the throne, presenting scrolls from every corner of the world. Darius listens not to war or rebellion, but to reports of markets, bridges, harvests, and roads. His empire was not built upon fear, but on knowledge. The wise king, he once said, is he who knows what his people see and walks where they walk. You can feel that truth vibrating through the palace, the sense that this was not a kingdom of distance, but of unity. Now centuries have passed, and yet the road still breathes beneath the soil. Modern highways follow its forgotten bones. Cities still bloom where its stations once stood. Even now, as you close your eyes, you can imagine the rhythm of those hooves again, carrying messages through light and shadow, binding the world together 1 mile at a time. The royal road was not merely Darius's creation, it was the empire itself, the pulse of civilization, the whisper of connection, the proof that distance can never defeat destiny. And as the last light fades from the horizon, you turn once more toward the west, where the scent of the sea mixes with the dust of empires. Somewhere beyond those waters, a storm is rising, a new world stirring beneath the waves of the Aegean. But for now, you rest beside the quiet road, feeling its heartbeat slow, steady, eternal. And the whisper of Persia lingers in the wind. It begins with silence, a silence so deep it feels like the breath before a storm. You stand upon a shore where the sea shimmers like liquid glass. To the east lies the grandeur of Persia, to the west, the small and scattered cities of Greece. Between them, only the whisper of wind and the promise of collision. The air smells of salt and bronze. Ships sleep in harbors, sails folded like wings at rest. But beyond the calm, drums are waiting, and the rhythm of destiny stirs beneath the surface of the world. Once the empire's reach had seemed eternal. From the Indus to the Nile, Persia ruled with wisdom and law. The royal road carried its messages. The king's peace carried its order. But even the most perfect harmony cannot silence the song of pride. To the west, in marble cities like Athens and Sparta, people spoke of freedom. Eleutheria, they called it. They were small but fierce, their loyalty not to kings, but to the idea of self. And when Darius the Great heard that Athens had helped rebels in Ionia, Persian subjects who burned the city of Sardis, his calm gaze turned toward the sea. "Who are these Athenians?" he asked, and he wrote their name upon a tablet of clay, a reminder to avenge what had been defied. Each day before he ate, he commanded a servant to whisper in his ear, "Master, remember the Athenians." Years passed. When the tide of rebellion was crushed, Darius turned his eyes toward the Aegean. In 492 BCE, his fleet sailed northward, an empire of ships gliding like shadows upon water. But the winds themselves seemed to protest. A storm rose from the Thracian coast, shattering masts, drowning men. The sea, it seemed, favored no empire. Darius paused, rebuilt, returned, and in 490 BCE, his generals marched to the plains of Marathon. You can almost hear it, the clash of bronze, the cry of men, the pounding of feet as 10,000 Athenians charged across the fields. Dust rose like smoke, and within hours Persia's mighty formation wavered. The Athenians, fighting for the dream of their city, pushed the invaders back to the sea. The Battle of Marathon ended, and the messenger ran 26 miles to Athens to whisper a single word before collapsing: victory. For Persia, it was not defeat, it was a pause. Darius's empire still stretched across continents, still glowed with temples, palaces, and peace. But time has a way of passing crowns from father to son, and destiny too moved forward. When Xerxes, son of Darius, ascended the throne, the old oath still echoed in the halls of Persepolis. Remember the Athenians. Xerxes was not a man of hesitation. He gathered an army so vast that rivers were said to run dry when they drank. From every corner of the empire they came, Medes, Egyptians, Indians, Babylonians, and Persians, a living map of the world beneath his banner. Bridges of boats were laid across the Hellespont, carved by human hands into submission. Even the sea, Xerxes believed, could be commanded. You walk now among his encampment, rows of tents stretching beyond sight, fires glowing like constellations fallen to earth. Priests pray to Ahura Mazda, asking for balance and victory. The king sits upon a golden throne, his gaze fixed upon the horizon. There is no anger in his eyes, only a calm determination. The desire to complete what his father began, yet somewhere deep within the wind a whisper lingers. Fate does not serve kings. The year is 480 BCE. The invasion begins. Persia's ships cover the Aegean like a living carpet. Armies march through Thrace, through Macedon, down into the narrow passes of Thermopylae. Here the mountains close in, and 300 Spartans stand waiting, their bronze shields gleaming in the dawn. You can feel the stillness before the clash, the silence before history exhales. When the first wave of Persian arrows darkens the sky, the Greeks raise their shields like mirrors of defiance. For 3 days the pass holds, not because they hope to live, but because they chose how to die. When the mountain path is betrayed and the Persians finally break through, Leonidas, the Spartan king, removes his helmet and smiles into the storm. "Come and take them," he had said, and his words will live far longer than his life. The road to Athens lies open. Xerxes' forces burn the city, flames dance upon the marble temples, and the goddess Athena's statue glows in the firelight. But the Greeks are not finished. Their ships regroup, and at Salamis the narrow straits become the empire's undoing. Persian vessels, too many to maneuver, crash into one another as Greek triremes strike from the shadows. The sea that once carried Persia's glory now carries its wreckage. Xerxes watches from the cliffs, his golden throne silent beneath the smoke. The winds of war subside. Persia remains mighty, but something has shifted. An idea has been born upon the western winds: freedom, autonomy, choice. Persia will endure for centuries, its culture, wisdom, and order shaping generations to come. But from this moment onward, history itself will be a dialogue between empire and individuality, between harmony and self-will. As night falls over the Aegean, you can still hear the sound of waves against forgotten ships. The embers of burned cities glow faintly beneath the sand. The storm has passed, yet the world feels different, as if a door has opened that will never close again. In the quiet that follows, you wonder if empires ever truly win, or if every victory only leads them closer to the edge of their own reflection. The wind carries your thought away, toward the east, where Persia's golden light still flickers, and where one man, Xerxes, now older, quieter, sits beside the fire, listening to the waves that once obeyed him. Somewhere within he knows, the greatest battles are not fought for land but for the soul of the world. The halls of Persepolis glow with morning light. Columns rise like frozen music, their carvings shimmering with the stories of kings. Between them walks a man draped in white and gold, Xerxes, son of Darius, whose very name means the ruler of heroes. He moves with the grace of command, but his eyes, dark, deep, and searching, carry a quiet weight, the kind of weight only a crown can give. The empire he inherits is vast beyond imagining. From the steppes of Central Asia to the temples of Egypt, from the Indus to the Aegean, all bow before the throne of Persia. And yet, within this sea of loyalty, there is a storm. Greece, small, defiant, its people refusing to kneel. His father had vowed revenge. Now the vow has passed to the son. Xerxes ascends the throne not with triumph, but with purpose. He swears before Ahura Mazda, "I will unite the world under one light, the light of Persia's truth." For years, preparations fill the empire. Bridges of ships span the Hellespont. Roads tremble beneath the weight of marching feet. Every province sends its best. Archers from Babylon, horsemen from Bactria, infantry from Egypt, and engineers from Persepolis. The royal army becomes a living continent, a breathing universe of human faith. Historians will say his army numbered over 1 million, but the true number lies not in soldiers. It lies in belief, belief in order, belief in unity, belief that one man could carry the dreams of the world. Before the invasion, Xerxes stands at the Hellespont, the wind rising from the sea like a voice of judgment. When a storm destroys his first bridge of boats, he commands the sea to be whipped, 300 lashes for defiance. To some it is arrogance. To Xerxes, it is control. He looks out across the waters and whispers, "Even the sea must learn obedience." Then, as dawn breaks, the army begins its march into Greece. The earth itself seems to bow beneath them. In Thermopylae, the Persians meet resistance, a narrow pass guarded by 300 Spartans. For days, the world holds its breath as the might of Persia presses against the will of men. When the pass finally falls, Xerxes walks through the valley of the dead. He does not smile. He does not boast. He simply says, "They were worthy of remembrance." He orders a stone to be raised upon the site, not for Persia, but for those who had dared to stand. Even in victory, he honors the valor of his enemies. In Athens, fire consumes marble. The temples of the gods collapse into ash. The statue of Athena, protector of the city, glows red against the flames. Xerxes watches from his chariot, his face lit not with triumph, but thought. He whispers to his advisor Mardonius, "Do they love their city more than we love our empire?" Mardonius bows. "They love only themselves, my king." Xerxes says nothing. The wind carries the scent of smoke and salt, and for the first time he wonders if power can truly conquer meaning. Then comes Salamis. The Persian navy, vast and shimmering, moves through the narrow straits. Greek ships wait in silence, their oars steady, their sails low. Xerxes watches from the cliffs, his golden throne gleaming beneath the sun. Below, chaos unfolds. Ships collide. Waves swallow pride and wood alike. When the battle ends, the Aegean is littered with the bones of empires. The sea has chosen. For the first time, the ruler of heroes must face something he cannot rule, fate itself. After Salamis, Xerxes returns eastward, leaving Mardonius to command what remains. The invasion falters. Greece remains unconquered. Yet back in Persia, no rebellion rises. No nation dares break free. The empire endures, strong, radiant, magnificent. But Xerxes is different. He walks the gardens of Susa at night, listening to fountains whispering in the dark. He dreams not of victory but of peace. Sometimes his counselors find him staring at the stars reflected in a pool. "What good is gold," he murmurs, "if it cannot buy stillness?" Years pass. Palaces grow higher, temples more intricate. Yet something inside him fades, like the slow dimming of a torch in still air. He becomes quieter, more withdrawn. Some say he became cruel, others say he became wise. But those who served him closely knew the truth. He was simply tired. Tired of conquest, tired of ceremony, tired of being the man the world expected him to be. In his final years, Xerxes stands once more upon the terrace of Persepolis. The wind moves through the carved columns, carrying voices of kings long gone. He looks toward the horizon, toward the west where the sun sets, and for a moment he smiles. "Perhaps," he whispers, "to rule is not to conquer, but to understand." The crown upon his head feels heavier than ever. He removes it and places it upon the stone beside him. The gold gleams softly in the light of evening, a symbol of power and of the burden it brings. When Xerxes dies, the empire mourns not just a king, but an age. Under him, Persia reached its zenith, its architecture, its art, its vision of divine order. And though he failed to conquer Greece, he succeeded in something far greater. He showed the world that even emperors are made of silence and doubt. In that truth lies his legacy, not as a god, but as a man who carried the sky. Night has fallen over the high plains of Bactria. The wind drifts softly across the stones, carrying whispers older than memory. In the distance, a small fire burns, steady, unwavering, its golden light dancing against the dark. You walk closer and find a man kneeling before it, his eyes reflecting both the flame and the stars above. He is Zarathustra, or as the Greeks would later call him, Zoroaster. He was not born a king, nor did he seek a throne. He was born into a world of chaos, a time when men prayed to many gods, and truth was lost among countless rituals. But in the silence of the mountains he heard a voice. It was not thunder, it was clarity. "There is only one God," the voice said, "Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord. He is light, and he dwells within all that is good." From that moment, Zoroaster's life changed forever. He began to speak not of offerings or idols, but of choice, the sacred freedom of every human soul. "In each heart," he said, "two forces dwell, Asher the truth, and Druj the lie. Your life is the battleground between them." His message was simple, but it shook the foundations of the ancient world. Zoroaster walked barefoot from village to village, preaching peace to warriors and wisdom to kings. Some mocked him, some feared him, others simply turned away. But those who listened, truly listened, felt something awaken inside them, like a spark finding its home in dry wood. He taught that the universe was a moral order, a vast design where every thought, every word, and every deed created ripples that shaped eternity. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. These three became the pillars of the faith, not as commandments, but as a compass, guiding humanity toward harmony with creation itself. Years passed before his words reached a throne. In Bactria, a wise king named Vishtaspa invited Zoroaster to his court. There, beneath painted ceilings and burning lamps, the prophet spoke of Ahura Mazda, of truth over illusion, of purity over pride, of fire as the symbol of divine light. Vishtaspa listened long into the night, and when dawn came, he bowed before Zoroaster and said, "The world has slept long enough in darkness. Let it wake." With that one act, faith found its protector, and Persia found its soul. Temples rose where eternal fires were kept alive. These were not places of idols, but of light, the purest symbol of creation's truth. Priests known as Magi tended the sacred flames, reciting hymns from the Avesta, Zoroaster's divine scripture, written in verses that sang of cosmic balance. Each ritual was not to please the gods, but to align oneself with the rhythm of Asher, the truth of the universe. Even kings, before battles or coronations, would face the sacred fire and swear, "May my thoughts be pure, my words be true, my deeds be just." You can almost hear the quiet crackle of the sacred flame, its warmth wrapping the empire in golden calm. This was not the fire that destroyed, it was the fire that remembered. It burned in every temple, in every heart that chose truth over deceit. From these fires, Zoroastrianism became the spiritual spine of Persia, guiding rulers from Cyrus to Darius. It taught them mercy, justice, and humility, that even the king was accountable to divine order. "A ruler is but a servant of truth," the old texts whisper. The world beyond Persia watched in awe. The Greeks studied its philosophy. The Jews adopted its visions of angels and afterlife, and later, even Christianity and Islam would carry echoes of its light, heaven and hell, angels and demons, the final judgment. All these ideas, born from Zoroaster's revelation, traveled through time, woven into the fabric of future faiths. But for Zoroaster, it was never about power. It was about awakening. In the twilight of his years, the prophet returns to a small temple near the river Oxus. The sacred fire burns low, its light tender and eternal. He sits before it, feeling the quiet presence of Ahura Mazda in the glow. He closes his eyes and the flame flickers, not as an ending, but as a continuation. Because Zoroaster did not die into silence, he became part of the light itself. His teachings would guide generations of kings, scholars, poets, and travelers, a current of truth flowing beneath the ages. Even now, in the ruins of ancient temples, somewhere beneath the dust and stars, his words still linger. In the battle between good and evil, choose the light, again and again and again. The fire before you wavers gently, its embers glowing like stars on earth. You realize that history is not just memory, it is faith, still breathing. And as the flame steadies, you sense that the empire's true strength was never its armies or wealth, but this, the quiet, endless fire of the spirit. The wind moves gently across the plains of Persepolis, carrying the scent of dust, cedar, and smoke. The city sleeps, its columns standing tall like guardians of forgotten gods, its stairways carved with kings and messengers who once ruled the known world. You walk through the ruins and the silence feels heavier than stone. The Empire of Light, the realm of Cyrus and Darius, is about to meet its shadow. Far in the west, beyond the Aegean and Anatolia, a young man dreams of glory. His name is Alexander of Macedon. At 20, he already commands an army that moves like a storm, swift, brilliant, unstoppable. He carries with him the teachings of Aristotle, the courage of Achilles, and the fire of ambition that no sea could drown. He does not come merely to conquer. He comes to understand, to bind the world into one vast thought. Yet destiny rarely listens to reason. You travel beside him as he crosses the Hellespont, that thin ribbon of water separating Europe from Asia. As his horse's hooves touch Persian soil, he hurls a spear into the ground and whispers, "From this earth I shall take what is mine." The invasion begins. Cities fall like leaves in autumn. Sardis surrenders without a fight. Halicarnassus resists and burns, and by the time Alexander reaches Issus, he faces the great Persian king himself, Darius III. The battle is chaos. Trumpets scream, dust blinds, and the Persian chariots thunder toward the Macedonian lines. But Alexander rides like lightning, his lance flashing, his men roaring behind him. The formation breaks, and for the first time in centuries Persia trembles. Darius flees eastward, leaving behind his chariot, his crown, and the weight of an empire crumbling into dust. Yet Alexander does not celebrate cruelty. He walks through the royal tent of Darius and finds not treasure but humanity. The letters, the family, the quiet traces of a king undone by fate. He fought not as a tyrant, but as a man defending his home, he murmurs. Even the conqueror feels the ache of victory. From there you follow him deeper into the heart of Persia, through Babylon, where gardens hang like floating dreams, through Susa, where gold glitters beneath ancient scripts of law, and finally toward Persepolis, the sacred city of kings. The palace gates open to him in silence. No army resists. Only the whispers of the past greet his arrival. He climbs the great stairway, his steps echoing through reliefs of tribute-bearers and soldiers, the story of an empire carved into eternity. That night, a feast is held. Wine flows, torches blaze, and the air hums with the wildness of conquest. Greek and Persian alike dance beneath the marble colonnades. For a moment, the world seems one, east and west entwined in celebration. But as the night deepens, the wine burns hotter. Flames catch in silk banners, then in wooden beams, and suddenly Persepolis becomes a sea of fire. Some say Alexander himself lit the first torch, urged on by dancers and poets, a drunken gesture of revenge for Greece's suffering. Others say he wept as the fire grew, regretting what he had done. History remembers both stories, perhaps both are true. You stand now among the burning halls, columns crack, roofs collapse, and the carved lions of the Achaemenids glow red in the inferno. The air is thick with the scent of cedar, and the sound of memories turning to ash. Alexander watches, his face bathed in orange light. He whispers, "I did not mean to destroy greatness, only to inherit it." But fire cannot tell the difference between victory and loss. Days later, as smoke still rises from the ruins, he orders that artisans and scholars be spared. He calls for translators to merge Greek and Persian texts, for healers to share their sciences, for architects to build cities bearing both worlds' names. From this fusion, a new culture is born, Hellenistic Persia, where knowledge travels farther than armies ever could. In Babylon, Alexander studies the stars with Persian magi. In Susa, he marries Roxana, a noblewoman from Bactria, a union of two civilizations, sealed not in conquest but in curiosity. You sense a shift in him. The young conqueror who once sought glory now seeks meaning. He begins to speak of oneness, a world where East and West share wisdom instead of war. But time is rarely kind to visionaries. At 32 in the city of Babylon, Alexander's breath falters. Some say it was fever, others whisper poison. Whatever the cause, his dream ends where it began, beneath the same endless sky he once swore to conquer. You stand at his bedside as the torches flicker low. Maps surround him, drawings of rivers and mountains yet unseen. He raises a trembling hand and traces the borders of Persia, the empire he both destroyed and preserved. "To the strongest," he whispers. And then the flame in his eyes fades. Outside, the Babylonian night grows still. Centuries will pass, but in every kingdom that rises after him, in the art of Greece, in the poetry of Persia, in the whispers of scholars across continents, the blend of his conquest remains. For though Alexander burned a city, he also ignited a bridge, one that joined two halves of the human story. And as you look once more at the ruins of Persepolis, you see that the fire he left behind was not just destruction, it was transformation. The smoke thins, and dawn breaks over the mountains. The marble pillars gleam faintly, their shadows long, their silence soft. And in that silence, you hear it. The empire breathing again, not in walls or crowns, but in memory and art, in the eternal pulse of history. You awaken to the whisper of embers. Somewhere in the vast emptiness between ruin and rebirth, the fire still breathes. It crackles softly against the horizon, warming the shadows of mountains and the quiet stones of forgotten temples. For centuries, silence had ruled Persia, the proud voices of its kings swallowed by foreign tongues, its sacred fires dimmed by conquest. But now something stirs beneath the sands. You can feel it, the old spirit returning. You walk through the plains of Fars, the birthplace of emperors, where every breeze carries a trace of forgotten glory. In the distance, a group of riders glides across the dawn, their banners painted with the sacred fire, the symbol of Ahura Mazda. At their head rides Ardashir, a man who carries both sword and prophecy. He was once a governor's son, born into the quiet service of a fading order. But in his heart, the fire never died. He dreamed not of mere power, but of purity, the restoration of the world's balance, the harmony between king and faith, empire and spirit. The year was 224 CE. The Parthian Empire, tired and fractured, had lost its soul. Its kings quarreled while its people suffered, its provinces forgotten. And from within that chaos, Ardashir rose, not as a destroyer, but as a rebuilder. When he rode into Ctesiphon, the capital, the air trembled not with fear but with awe. The fire altars were lit once again. And as the sacred flames roared upward, Persia was reborn. The Sassanid Empire had awakened. The world began to change around you. Caravans once again threaded the Silk Road, carrying silk, jade and wisdom between East and West. Persian artisans carved dreams into stone, palaces filled with mosaics of kings crowned by angels, gardens blooming in perfect symmetry, walls that shimmered in the sun like woven light. In the temples, the Magi sang hymns in ancient Avestan, keeping the flame alive through every dusk and dawn. You step into one of those temples now. It is quiet except for the soft hum of devotion. The air smells of cedar and smoke. At the altar, a priest tends to the eternal fire, his face lit with reverence. Each flicker of flame seems to hold the memory of ages past, of Achaemenid grandeur, of Zoroaster's wisdom, of every empire that ever dared to dream eternal. You close your eyes and for a moment you feel it, the pulse of continuity, the heartbeat of a civilization that refuses to fade. The Sassanid kings saw themselves not just as rulers, but as guardians of truth. Asher, the divine order of the world. They built schools, libraries, observatories. They revived Persian literature and art, giving new voice to ancient myths. In Gundeshapur, scholars from Greece, India, and China gathered under the same roof, translating knowledge, blending worlds. Medicine, philosophy, mathematics, all thrived beneath Persian skies. You imagine walking those marble halls at night, the lamplight glowing on scrolls of wisdom older than time. Yet even in this golden dawn, shadows lingered. The empire's borders stretched wide, from the Arabian deserts to the mountains of Anatolia, from the Caspian Sea to the edge of India. And beyond those borders, another empire watched, Rome, proud and unyielding. The rivalry was inevitable, a dance of power between two titans. Across centuries, Persia and Rome clashed again and again, each seeking to shape the world in its own image. But even amid wars, respect grew. Envoys carried gifts, scholars exchanged ideas, and art from both realms began to intertwine, proof that even enemies could mirror each other as brilliance. In this harmony of light and conflict, Persia's spirit matured. You walk through Ctesiphon, the heart of the empire. Before you towers the Tak Khazra, its grand arch rising like a frozen wave of stone. It has stood for centuries, defying time itself, a monument not just to power but to endurance. You trace your hand along its cold surface and wonder how many souls before you have done the same. Emperors, soldiers, poets, pilgrims, each one leaving behind an invisible echo, a whisper in the grand corridor of time. Night falls slowly over the empire. The temples glow in the distance, their fires dancing against the dark. You hear the distant call of prayer, soft, melodic, timeless. It reminds you that history, too, is a kind of devotion, a fire passed from one hand to another, never truly extinguished. As you drift into the stillness of that Persian night, you realize that rebirth is not an ending, but a continuation. The flame that survives every storm, the soul that sleeps only to awaken anew. And as the winds of the plateau whisper through the ancient stones, you hear the faint echo of the next dawn approaching, a dawn that will bring not just glory, but destiny. You close your eyes and the fire hums softly, waiting for the next age to begin. The night is endless and the stars are old. You walk through the silence of Persepolis, where time itself seems to pause and listen. The marble steps beneath your feet are cool with moonlight, and every breath feels like a whisper from another age. The fires of the Sassanids have long faded, the kings turned to dust, the banners to sand. And yet, something lingers. It moves like a sigh across the ruins. You cannot see it, but you feel it. A pulse beneath the earth, a memory that refuses to die. Persia may have fallen 1,000 years ago, but her soul still walks beside you. Listen closely. It speaks not in words, but in the quiet rhythm of culture, in the curve of an arch, the scent of a garden, the melody of a poem whispered under breath. Wherever beauty lives, Persia breathes. You drift through time as if gliding through a dream. The centuries unfold before you like pages in a sacred book. From the ashes of Persepolis rose poets, men like Rumi, who spoke of love as a bridge between souls. Hafez, whose verses danced like fireflies between reason and divine madness. And Ferdowsi, who rewove the history of kings into the immortal Shahnameh, ensuring that even when empires fall, stories do not. Their words became the true empire, invisible, eternal. They crossed borders without armies, conquered hearts without swords. You realize as you listen to their echoes that this was Persia's greatest victory, to rule not through conquest, but through meaning. Beyond the poets, the artisans carried her light. The domes of Isfahan curved like the sky itself, their turquoise tiles shimmering like frozen waves of heaven. Persian gardens bloomed in the design of paradise, each flower a symbol, each fountain a verse. Even distant lands borrowed her grace, the Mughal palaces of India, the courtyards of Andalusia, the geometric patterns of Ottoman mosques, all carrying whispers of that same Persian dream of order and beauty. You walk through those reflections now, centuries apart, yet somehow connected. Every civilization that touched Persia took away a spark, a word, a melody, a color, a philosophy, and carried it into their own night. It was as if Persia had become an idea rather than a place, a light so vast it could never truly be extinguished. The empires that conquered her vanished in turn. Alexander, the Arabs, the Mongols, each came with fire and left with silence. But the Persian spirit endured quietly, hidden in language, art, and faith. Even when her temples were turned into mosques, the rhythm of her soul remained. The calligraphy still curved like the wings of Zoroastrian flames. The verses still whispered of duality, light and darkness, truth and deceit, heaven and earth. Centuries later, when travelers came from the West, they found in Persia something they could not name. A melancholy beauty, a grace older than memory. They wrote of her gardens, her poets, her people, and left feeling as if they had touched eternity itself. And perhaps, Gianni, that's what Persia truly was. Not an empire of borders, but an empire of the soul. Her gift to the world was not gold or conquest, but the eternal idea that wisdom, kindness, and beauty outlive all kings. You sit now among the ruins, watching the constellations that once guided Persian astrologers across the desert sky. The same stars that witnessed Cyrus's mercy, Darius's vision, Zoroaster's flame, and Rumi's love still shine above you, unchanged, eternal. And in their silent shimmer, you hear a question, a gentle, endless whisper. What, after all, is history, if not the memory of the soul? The wind sighs through the pillars, carrying fragments of old prayers. You can almost hear the murmur of the royal road, the laughter of Persepolis, the chanting of priests by sacred fires. For a moment, all of time folds into one breath. Past and present become one heartbeat. You realize the story never truly ended. It only changed form. The empire sleeps, yes, but its dream continues. In every act of creation, in every search for truth, in every human who still believes that knowledge and compassion can change the world. Persia became poetry. Persia became philosophy. Persia became you. And as the last light fades from the horizon, you feel that truth settle deep in your chest. Calm, endless, warm. Because the past was never gone. It simply learned to whisper. You open your eyes. The journey through Persia, from its birth under Achaemenes to its rebirth through fire, has ended. But its echoes will stay with you, Gianni, in every poem, every song, every gentle act of wisdom. The flame lives on through dreamers like you. If this journey through time touched your heart, if you felt the whispers of lost empires and the warmth of eternal light, then don't let it fade into silence. Like this story to keep the flame alive. Comment what part of Persia's journey spoke to your soul the most, and subscribe, because many more forgotten worlds still wait to be awakened from the dust of time. The past is calling. Will you listen again?